This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through custom Trace Audio cables and the new Empirical Labs pump compressor mixed through Isotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, Nectar, and Plasma, all mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
We had the same thing at the music show. We had a little vestibule that was like a walk between to get to the mic cabinet, and it was all concrete. And we would close the doors and we would mic that vestibule, and it had a short decay time, but it still added that dimension. If I can't stress this enough to your listeners, the room is your friend. You know, you need to create a Z-axis. That's what creates depth. That's the secret sauce.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Sick of searching for the right cable or wondering how to hook up your studio? Trace Audio has you covered. Based in Nashville but serving studios everywhere, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, patch bay labels, and wiring solutions for home and pro studios. Try out the free online custom patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com to easily color code, label, and organize your XLR or quarter-inch bays, which are popular with home studios. It's sleek, professional, and simple to use. Then use the code RSR15 for 15% off printing and shipping your custom patch bay labels to take your studio to the next level.
Someone asked me a while back, do you fear AI will one day replace you as a mastering engineer? Well, it hasn't yet. That's because algorithms don't listen to music or to clients. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. When I master, I experience the music as your fans will, with the honesty of fresh ears. And unlike AI, I master with your intentions in mind, not merely to process the mix and boost the levels. If you want an experienced live engineer to master your music as only a human can, find me at soundporter.com.
Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jack Miele, an 11 times platinum, 6 times Telly, and 5 times Global Music Award-winning audio engineer, producer, composer, multi-instrumentalist. He's also an audio and or mix engineer on 1 Grammy Award-winning and 5 nominated albums, as well as Emmy Award-winning television promos. Based in New Orleans, he is the former owner of the world-famous Fudge Recording Studio. After Fudge closed its doors in 2012, Jack moved to the Music Shed recording facilities as their head of operations chief producer, where he's been from 2012 to 2018. He's now the owner of Jack Miele Productions LTD and runs his studio in the Garden District of New Orleans. Jack's also a guitarist and vocalist for the sensational 80s act, the Molly Ringwalds. That is an awesome name. And and thank you, and a big shout out to Chris Finney for making our introduction. Thanks very much, Chris. Please welcome Jack Miele to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jack, are you ready to rock, my friend?
I am ready, Lidge.
You know, listening to your discography, I can tell that you are ready to rock, potentially with a bit of a jam or blues twist to it, I would say.
Yeah, rock has always been my love. I definitely, I do all kinds. I was, as a matter of fact, right before we got on this, I was mixing a contemporary pop song, you know, but rock has always been my jam, you know.
Yeah. Now, when I was watching some of the Molly Ringwalds, well, I almost renamed your band the Raleigh Mingwalds, which would be, that might be the one I start.
There you go.
But watching you do that, I mean, you seem to, you've got those power pipes too, right? You can kind of do the full voice rock singing.
Yeah, I try to. It's so funny because I'm kind of a singer I'm like one of those like Swiss Army knife guys where like I really only learned to sing just because I had to. It wasn't, I had no desire to be a singer whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, in original bands, I didn't learn how to sing until I was in my mid-20s. And I didn't, I'm definitely not one of those guys that it came naturally to. I had to work for it. And I was somebody who had to learn about intonation and how to sing in head voice and how to not blow my voice out and, you know, all of those things. So it was one of those, I'm blessed that at, 47, I can still sing with pipes and can sing a lot of high stuff and have a really strong voice and don't really ever get hoarse after gigs just because I learned how to do it kind of by accident,
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say you didn't really sing to your 20s, meaning you didn't try and do the band thing, or you really
Oh no, I was in
doing
bands.
choir or anything like that?
I did. All right. So I did do choir when I was in college. I did go to college for music. And when I was in college, I was in choir and, we did Mozart's Requiem and stuff like that. And I was a baritone. And I didn't really, at the time, I just didn't even really know that much about singing. And I just kind of followed the guy next to me, the baritone next to me that was a better reader than I was. And, so, but because I had such an ear that, I'm holding the sheet music and, but I had memorized the whole thing in my head. The whole hour-long piece was memorized in my head just because I had such a melodic memory that I could just do that. I wasn't even reading it. I was just, I was just singing. And so that being said, I was a guitar player in bands since I was 14 or 15. Drums is really my first instrument. I was in bands as a drummer when I was 14. And then I guess I would say 15 and a half or so, 16 is when I started to become guitar player in bands. And guitar was like the thing that just, boy, me and it clicked. And I advanced rather quickly. And, but I just I didn't care about singing at all. I wasn't singing background. I was just the guy that, no, I don't need a microphone, on stage.
Did you start out, did you go straight to rhythm or did you want a solo right away?
I wanted to be Ace Frehley. I wanted to play lead, so I instantly started learning how to play lead. That was my whole deal.
But some of your, like in the Molly Ringwalds video, it's like a mashup between Angus Young and Devo or something. I was picking up on.
I haven't done the Angus Young in a long time. I kind of gravitated towards the Devo character. It's a very funny dynamic in that band because I've done it for years. I've been in the band 25 years. Yeah. And we've had a lot of success. We kind of, in some ways, I would even say rewrote the rules of what's possible as a cover band, at least around here, So what I will say is that we each member of the band had multiple characters. We had the same character, multiple costumes. And we found that when we would change costumes, even in the context of the same show, like sometimes we'd take a break and we would change costumes and come back out and people would think it was different people on stage and the crowd wouldn't react the same way. And so I've gone through a bunch of different identities as that character. And the Devo character was the one that everybody just kind of reacted to. Everybody else, like you tell people to, hey, sing along or scream or whatever, and they wouldn't react as hard as they would. It was that character. So, so it's like some of the guys in the band, they've all tried different characters, and it's funny because the crowd chose for us which ones were going to be the keepers. So
so then you just kind of, once you find what the most popular character is, just kind of stick with that one through the show.
Yeah, my keyboard player / vocalist, Dickie, he's lucky to where he had two characters that really hit a home run. And the crowd reacted equally for each. And so he's one of the lucky ones that had two characters. But the rest of the guys in the band, he would either be the Freddie Mercury character or he would be Pee Wee Herman. And
those seem like both good characters.
Yeah, the crowd loved those characters. And so he just... So, he'll change it up. He's been Freddie for a while now, but he'll every now and then, like when Paul Rubens died recently, he brought back Pee Wee and, so things like that. But it's
Which one had more attitude, the Freddie Mercury or the
Freddie
Pee Wee
Mercury?
Herman?
The Pee Wee was the fun-loving one, you know?
Right. I always felt like Pee Wee was fun-loving, but really has an attitude. You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look.
Don't fuck with my bike, you know?
I'm one of the lucky ones, man. I like the fact that, because it's not just, the one thing about the Molly Ringwalds is that it's not just the shtick. We're a fantastic band. Everybody in that band is a player. Everybody in that band, like we do, there are multiple things like the guys in that band, you
guys doing 80s covers?
Mm-hmm. But like when I was working on with Paul Meany on Youngblood's record, he was producing and I was one of the engineers. They wanted to do some live, captured live in the studio stuff with some of the Molly guys, were the guys we hired, you know, like to be on these records. And I also am the musical director for the Ronnie Lamarck Orchestra. It's a 22-piece big band kind of thing, and every one of the Molly Ringwalds is in that band, you know, and they're all, because there's a lot of layers to those players, you know. It's just, we just happened to create something that was fun that everybody identified with, and we just went with it, and it became a very successful business.
Now, do you feel like sometimes that's kind of a nice key to longevity in music and making records? Like sometimes a smart move is do the production, do the studio stuff, but tap yourself into some sort of local band that can keep you just out there playing and hitting the stage, even if it's a cover band, just doing something really fun where you're playing with other people like that?
This is to me a two-part question. So I'll answer in two parts. So the first part is about the being in a band, even if it's a cover band or whatever. You know, a lot of people shit on cover bands, but cover bands is one of the ways I just can't remember who it was. Somebody very prominent just recently said this, a producer, but
probably Rick Rubin.
No, it wasn't Rick Rubin. It wasn't Bob Rock. I can't remember who said this, but they basically said that one of the ways to make real money in this industry is a cover band, you know, like, because it's consistent and people, you know, some of the cover bands are making more than the original bands that they're covering. Like, right. I guarantee that the Molly Ringwalds go out there and we generate more income and we have a higher premium than some of these one-hit wonder bands that we cover, you know. And now, you know, I don't get into the business, so I don't necessarily know what all those bands are making, but I'll rephrase and say that I have a good feeling that that's the case. Right. You know, I don't have any.
It's delivering the people what they want, like, repeatedly. You know, It's harder to do that as an original band. You might have so many hits, but.
Well, look, the proof is in the pudding. That, like I said, everybody shits on cover bands, but the Molly Ringwalds is a band that is a hard ticket sale band. We're not a soft ticket sell, which means, for all your listeners that don't know what that means, it means that we don't do the kind of gigs or shows. Very rarely do we do the kind of gigs or shows where people are already going to be. Like, if you were, like, for instance, if you do Jazz Fest in New Orleans, that's a soft ticket sale. Why? Because unless you're the Rolling Stones or the Foo Fighters or whatever, then people are already going to be there. Even if those other big bands weren't there, people will go just because it's Jazz Fest. So you have this captive audience that's already there, and you didn't have to draw them there. The Molly Ringwalds is the kind of band that, like, this weekend, we're going to be playing Orlando, and we'll sell out House of Blues Orlando, over 3,000 tickets with no opening band. It's just us.
Well, so I think this is relevant to making records in the studio, because those of us doing it might be either trying to do an original thing or wanting to do the cover thing. And part of the question that is inevitable is, you know, we can figure out a way to, like, finish our song, finish our record, release it, but then what? You know, so maybe this taps into that comment. And again, we don't have to spend the whole podcast talking about marketing a live band, but talk about that a little bit. It's like, you know, what is the then what part that can let you sell hard tickets and make a thing have life to it?
Liz, that is the single most asked question that I get is
it's like I'm like a cover band of podcast questions.
Well, it's the same. Well, I'm talking about, like, in the studio when I produce, because I produce a lot of young bands, and the bands come in and there is the now what syndrome. Well, we have this great record. Well, what do we do with it now? You release it into Spotify or into the ethers of streaming, and it's a drop of rain in the ocean, you know? So I think that I just recently read a statistic saying that something like of the 159 million songs that are on Spotify, something like, it was something crazy, like 78 million of them have got less than 1,000 streams.
Yeah.
And so that'll just that goes to show you, with 7 or 8 billion people on the earth, what's 1,000 streams is nothing. So that's what I'm trying to say is that, so you get this great record and now what? Well, the money in the music industry, in my opinion, these days is in the live performance. It's just ask Live Nation. Last year was their best year. I think last year made more money in live ticket sales than in history.
Wow. And then what are some of the simple secrets to that? Is it consistency as a live band, just being consistent with your shows? Is it some sort of outreach prior to the shows, or is it like just connecting with fans at shows?
The outreach is not like, people will find it. If it's good, they'll find it. The reason why we put, one of the things that we did first off is we didn't want to copy the other regional bands around us. We wanted to copy Kiss and Depeche Mode and the bands that were the huge bands. We would go to their shows and we would say, okay, we obviously can't afford what they're doing, but there are a lot of things that we can afford that are taking what they're doing and maybe scaling it down to fit into a club. And that's how we started. And so we put a lot of work into the show and into the performance aspect of it and into the musicality of it. So my advice is, if you're going to do something like that, it's a business. You've got to, if you wanted to go into a clothing store to buy clothes and the clothes are falling off the rack and things look dirty and it's like the person who's supposed to be helping you is on the phone and it looks bush. So when you have to treat it, it's no different. You have to treat it like, okay, if you went to go see a band, if you went to go see Van Halen, would David Lee Roth be walking around in the crowd before the show? No, you wouldn't be able to see him. He's inaccessible. And things, little tiny details like that. Like the band is not allowed to hang out, in the crowd before the show, because it takes away the mystery of it. We use a kabuki curtain so that there's a reveal. We don't allow opening
Can
bands.
we do that as mixers? Can separate us from everybody in the control room?
That would be great. But things like not having an opening band, because what happens is that when you do things to dress the stage up and you have an opening band, and then you ruin that surprise because now everybody can see the stage. So sorry to interrupt, but I'm doing a kabuki curtain right now on the Zoom call. Sorry, hanging up my eyeglasses cleaner. No, this is great though. I mean, it's just a great reminder. And then, obviously these same things apply to the studio and the making the records and production, which is, I don't know about, maybe there's a little mystery. Maybe that is a relevant spin on it. Do you feel like there's a mystery, a kabuki curtain for production that's important to keep between you and the artists you're working with? I think that, there are two layers here as well. There's the engineer layer and the producer layer. As an engineer, I feel like the devil's in the details. Like, I think a lot of people don't, I'm trying to find my words here. I feel like a lot of people don't put the kind of care a lot of times into the recording process because they think that they put too much emphasis on gear. I love gear. I own more gear than most people should. Like it's a sickness. It's like once you start to acquire gear, you just can't stop. But I feel like, yes, the gear is great, but there are so many companies now that are making gear that are being able to make good, lower, I don't want to call it cheap, we'll call it economical.
Less expensive.
Yeah, economical. Like they make economical gear that the layperson can buy that will stand up to the big stuff. And the thing is that most people don't put the kind of care. They think that if you have a Neve mic pre and this microphone and you can just throw it on anything and it automatically sounds good. There's the techniques of engineering, I feel like are starting to get lost a little bit. With I'm lucky I came in on the tail end of my producing engineering career. Started around 99, 2000, something like that, and knowing nothing, but we were still at the tail end. Smartphones didn't exist. Google didn't exist. Or if it did, it was
tape machines still did.
Tape machines still did. ADAT still did. So I learned right at the end. I feel like if I would have come in 10 years later, just 10 years, I would have been a totally different engineer.
Yeah. And now when you were coming into this in 99, were you in New Orleans at that point?
Yeah. Born and raised here. Yeah.
Okay. Groovy. Did you spend time with Daniel Lanois down there or any of that stuff?
See, that was a little before my time. So around 97, I was doing a record. The closest I came was at 97. I was doing a record at a place called Side One Studios with Greg Troyer, excuse me. And we bought some old tape from them because back then we were doing it on 2-inch, and Kingsway would sell all the old reels of 456.
Right.
And
back then we'd recycle tape for a couple of rounds.
Yeah.
Because it probably only got recorded on for the tracking and then just sat there. So it was really essentially a fresh reel of tape.
Absolutely. I remember that we bought it for $50 for the reel. And because tape was expensive, man. And it only held, well, we were recording 15 IPs back then. So
30 minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes, which one reel would do it. Nowadays, I like to record it at 30 and without noise reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And my machine is set up for +9 tape. So I'll use 499 and then I'll set it for 30 IPs with no noise reduction, and it sounds amazing,
That's great. So you're still cutting to tape.
Oh yeah. I don't do it for every project just because I'm not going to say it's not cost effective. It's not time effective. If you don't have an artist that's willing to, like, okay, this is an ongoing project, it's going to take a while. It's, if this is the kind of, hey, we have 2 days to record this many songs, and I'll just leave it out of the equation.
Now, will you guys stay on tape and not go digital, or do you sort of go back and forth?
It will get converted. So what I'll do is I'll go to tape, drums, bass, rhythm guitar, maybe piano, and then I'll dump it. And then vocals and overdubs, solos, things like that will be
in the computer. You get the benefits of the speed of computer. Well, yeah, there's definitely speed benefits in the computer.
And I also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I was almost like being my own critic when I said that speed benefit, because somebody's going to say tape's faster. Tape is faster for committing to a performance. Yeah. But the computer's faster for comping a vocal, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm somebody who embraces technology. I'm not one of these, guys that's like stuck in the 70s. I embrace what tape does, and I embrace what computers do. So I'm a true kind of hi-fi, lo-fi guy. Like I really do. I like what tape does to those instruments. But what I'll do is I'll daisy chain the tape machine in between. So it'll go from the snake to the pre's of the board, and then out of the board into the tape machine, out of the tape machine into the computer. And I will run it. I won't run off the repro head. I'll run off of the, sorry about that. I'll run off of the input head, or the input, not input head, but I'll run it in input so that it's actually physically streamlined and going through the tape machine. And so I'm getting a tape copy of it and a true Pro Tools copy of it in real time. So
and you just like having that backup or that choice later.
I like having the backup and the choice. And then what I'll do is once we fill up the whole side of the tape, which is about 17 minutes, I'll say, all right, everybody, go take a break, and I'll rewind the tape, and I'll make one master playlist change. And playlist 1 is Pro Tools, playlist 2 is tape, and I'll dump the whole tape in the Pro Tools.
So you're one of those horizontal session guys. Like,
no, I'm not.
You're not. Okay.
I don't. It incenses me when I get that. I mean, I have some friends that actually do it, and it makes me insane there's only one, in my opinion, there's only one medium where you should use the long horizontal session, or maybe two, and that's for movie scoring and for maybe a live record.
At Isotope, saturation just got a whole lot smarter. Introducing the new Isotope Plasma plugin to supercharge your sound by giving your tracks exactly what they need, precisely when and where they need it. Unlike traditional saturators that apply a static effect, Plasma's groundbreaking flux saturation technology analyzes your sound and applies dynamic processing, adding targeted warmth, depth, and character to bring out the best in your mixes and masters. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the new Plasma or any of the awesome plugins at isotope.com. Atom Audio proudly announces the D3V active desktop monitors and H200 dynamic closed-back studio headphones, designed in Berlin for pro-level monitoring in home studios. The D3V features 3.5-inch woofers with ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact design ideal for songwriters and producers. The D3V includes USB-C and balanced analog inputs, a headphone output, and DSP room acoustics. The H200 closed-back headphones feature powerful 32-ohm drivers and comfortable ear pads in a durable metal construction, making them perfect for studio or portable use. The included plugin enhances tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot at atomaudio.com. Spell that out for the rock stars so they know what we mean by this long horizontal session.
So there are two schools really. There are the I'll call them the old school tape guys, which are I call it the linear guys, and then there are the playlist guys. I'm a playlist guy. So what I'll do is, let's say that you want to do 5 takes of the same song to see which one you like. There are some guys that will just hit record on Pro Tools and it'll stripe across the screen, and they'll do all 5 takes linearly, so that take 1 starts at 10 seconds, take 2 starts at 3 minutes and 45 seconds, take 3 starts at 6 minutes and whatever, 50 something seconds, and so on and so forth. And then they'll make markers and go take 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you live in this horizontal world, and your session for that one song ends up becoming something like 25 minutes or something,
right?
Or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, depending on how long the song is. If the song is 7 minutes and you do 5 takes of it, that's 35 minutes right there without spaces in between, so that makes me insane. And also another huge reason why I can't stand it is because even if you have a fast computer, it bogs down the computer, because the computer sees those long audio files and it's trying to tabulate or to calculate all of this, compute all this at the same time. And especially if you're at a high sample rate, I just find that the computer runs smoother. And then there's the second school, which is the playlist guys, which is like me. What I'll do is I'll make, let's say I have 24 tracks that are going in simultaneously: drums, bass, guitar, piano, and a scratch vocal. What I'll do is I'll start the first, and if I'm using a click, I'll tell everybody, okay, we have to start every single take at beat 1 of measure 3. So you get 2 measures a click, and then you come in. And they start.
And sometimes another trick is, after the first take gets counted in, sometimes I've worked with producers who will ask me to play back the original count and then punch in for the second take on the next one.
Right.
That way, that way all the stick clicks are the same and everybody knows where they are. But then you get layers of
Well, I had,
audio on the track.
Alex Anders taught me this trick. I don't know if you call it a trick or a technique, but he taught me this technique for Pro Tools, which I didn't know until I worked with him on American Horror Story. But what they would do is they would, let's say you have your stick clicks from take 1, okay? And you haven't even created the next playlist yet. It's just, there's no place. There's only one playlist. You hit take 1. Click, 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 click. And then you hit record, and you're technically recording over take 1. Like you see the pink going and it's recording over it. Well, while it's recording, then as it's recording, you go to the playlist and create a new playlist while it's recording,
Yeah.
and it flips into a new playlist, and therefore you have two playlists.
That's a great trick. I do that sometimes when we've got a vocal that's already been, 90% comped, and now we're punching in just, additional outros or something, and I don't want to have duplicates later.
Right.
So instead of duplicating each playlist, I'll just do what you said. The only thing to know about Rockstars is if you're in Pro Tools, when you drop into record and then flip the playlist, it's still going to name the audio file based on that original track that you dropped into record on. So that could throw you off slightly in the audio files folder later.
But if it's in a group, like when I track, what I'll do is I'll make one big group that's called tracking. It's the tracking group.
Yeah.
So anything,
I see the same thing.
Yeah. So anybody who's tracking live at that moment is in that tracking group. And when in Pro Tools, when you make a new playlist in a group, it just makes it. It doesn't ask you to name it.
Right. Exactly. So that's a great tip. And I'm glad you're talking about this stuff too, because for me, you probably feel similarly. Like when you're tracking bands in the studio, there's a whole like lexicon of important stuff to you and details and things like that. Tracking groups, click track routing, how to do the talk back. All these things are like crucially important.
Oh,
and for somebody doing hip hop records, it might be like, yeah, we don't have to deal with any of that stuff.
Right.
So it's fun. It's fun we get to talk about that.
I would definitely say that I specialize in large group recordings, like not necessarily symphonic stuff. I mean, I have done that, but I'm talking about like tracking an entire band with a horn section and acoustic piano and upright bass and all like at the same time, even vocals.
B3. Don't leave out the B3.
Oh yeah, sure. So like I did a session where we went to a studio in the country, and which is a great old vintage studio from the 70s. I think it opened in 71 or 72. It's where Kansas did Carry On Wayward Son and stuff like that.
Oh, right on.
But we did, it was drums, 2 guitars, bass, acoustic piano, B3, Wurlitzer, 4 background singers, and 6 horn players, and a lead vocalist, all simultaneously to tape.
That's awesome. Let's talk about that session. So what were some of the things that you did to set up for a session like that so that, you don't get down the road later and you're like, oh crap, we can't use this because of that or bleed or whatever. How do you make everybody comfortable so that they're performing their best, and how do you make sure each track is really usable for you later?
Okay, so that's a good question. So first off, because we're going to tape, we only have 24 tracks. So that's it. So, to me, creativity is doesn't come from options. It comes from limitations.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, okay, I can't put 75 room mics on the drums, so, but you do want some of those room mics because everybody, like the horn players, were in the same room as the drums. Now Studio in the Country has got a lot of real estate. It's like one of those long rooms, so you can put one guy on the other side of the room, and there will be some bleed, but it's not like being on top of each other. Yeah,
it's a good bleed.
Right. And they have it's a properly built studio. So they have a proper drum booth with the low ceiling. That's like sort of like, it's kind of like a drum ISO. That's like a semicircle, and they got the low ceiling. And then they have also got the room. It's like a staggered room as far as sonically, like, so you've got a dead room on one side, and as you move through the room, it becomes more alive.
Right. One side's all soft 703 and fabric. The other one's
it's slate and tile
stones.
and
It's like
stone.
river stones.
Yes,
or something,
that's
right?
exactly right. I was calling it slate, but it's like stone. And so the room is designed like that. So I put the horn players on the stone side, and I put the drummer on the dead side, and I put the piano kind of in the middle, and the only thing we isolated that we were able to isolate really is the lead vocal. Even the guitar amps use small amps with baffles. Don't use a half stack, So those are the kind of limitations. For bass, we do have a bass. They do have like we ran the bass cabinet like there's like a room way in the back. It's like the plate room, like where the EMT is, and we put the bass amp back there and ran a long cable.
Now, do you think that was then a sonic decision, or more of just like that seemed like a good place to put the bass amp? Like, in other words, does bass have a tendency to bleed onto other things more than another instrument?
It was, I find it does because of the low frequencies, but it was more of a limitation thing where it's the only room we had left to use anything for isolation. And so I was like, well, let's put the bass back there. And instead of just DI, I could have DI'd it and reamped it, but I wanted to capture it all together, so they have like a little inlet, sort of like next to the drums, there's like a little inlet or whatever. We put gobos around that. And I put the 4 girls in there to sing. And then we isolated the lead vocalist. So how do you deal with all that, right? And the piano, we put the lid not down, but almost down. Like we propped it up on the small stick.
Oh, right. I need to get one of those small things. I only got the big one.
Yeah,
closed or all the way.
Right. We propped it up on the small stick, and then we put like packing blankets on top of it. Right. And
now let me ask you that. Sorry, I apologize if you feel like I'm interrupting.
No, go ahead.
These questions pop in when you talk about stuff. The small stick piano lifts up the lid just so much.
Yep.
And what's the benefit of doing that versus all the way closed?
I mean,
you can get a mic in where you didn't have room before, or does it sound different, you think?
I feel like it does sound different, but it has more to do with the, at least for me, it's more because of the mics. Like I'm not a huge fan of, and I've tried them, those mics where they have the bar, and then
like Earthworks maybe makes them.
Right. I've used those and they sound good. But when I put a pair of 414s in there, it sounded a hell of a lot better to me, to my ears, so.
And if you lift the lid, you can kind of do the jazz style miking where they're just looking into the lifted lid rather than inside and over. Have you tried ever dabbled with like the PZMs just stuck underneath the lid?
Yeah, we had one of those at the Music Shed, and I'm trying to remember how I felt about it. I felt like I couldn't really get anything good out of it.
It sounds different. It's like a different piano sound, as I recall.
Yeah, it wasn't something that I remember never using it. So, for piano, and I've done a lot of jazz records, what I like personally is some sort of large diaphragm condenser on the inside, staggered pair, it's kind of in a Y shape a little bit. And whether they're 80.
Yeah, you had one of your records was the Real Deal Sessions to TU3 or 2-3.
Oh, yeah,
I'm not going to miss you. It had a great piano sound is one of the things I wrote down about that.
Well, you know what? I'll get to that in a second. Because I know exactly. I
told you, I'm guilty of jumping all over the place.
No, I know exactly what track you're talking about too, and I can't wait to tell you about that one. Okay, so at Studio in the Country, what we did was what I like for piano, for grand piano, is a pair of 414s in a Y shape, or it could be, it's a very underrated mic too for this, is it's a TLM 193. From Neumann. Those are sleeper mics. They sound fantastic. So maybe a pair of those, and then back right where the piano sort of dips in, almost like towards the end of it, I'll use like a 77 or a 44 ribbon mic or a Coles or something like that to get, it kind of gets that center sound, and so I have left, right, and center, and it gets the missing mid-range to me. So you put all of them together and they sound great. And
that's cool.
And sometimes I'll use a room mic or whatever, but like when you use too much, I see like when people like, they're miking like on the inside, then right here, then here, then here. And it's like, it just looks like a phasing nightmare to me, So there's so much that can go wrong in the phasing of that I'm not saying that those concepts are not valid. I'm just saying that I tend to find that I like a very focused sound. Just like on that TU3 record you were talking about, that TU3 record, that's a Wurlitzer Spin-It upright piano that I got when I was 12 years old. That I still have.
Man, those are great.
And it was mic'd with, it might have been a pair of 57s on the back, not not on the inside.
Cool.
Just two 57s in the back. And
57s are such great mics. Like we almost should buy more for our studio, because usually we've already used them. Like it's like, oh, I don't have any more because I already put it on the snare and I already put it on the electric guitars or whatever. So first move, Rockstars, buy 2 more. Second move, try them every time you're trying stuff, because you might be amazed at how good they sound. And the one way I like to think about it is sometimes we go for this big hi-fi thing, and then when we go to mix, we try and take all that hi-fi away again so that it fits into the mix and has the right kind of mid-range without too much bottom, without too much top. And lo and behold, the 57 started with that.
Yeah, it is a fantastic tool. I mean, I have, I don't know, I think 4 of them, and I need more of them. And I think I didn't go to recording school, but I've heard from people who have interned for me who did go to recording school that one of their assignments was to record an entire track using only 57s.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
So it's a
Well, I remember there was a rumor, we would talk about how, like, I heard that, Rick Rubin recorded the whole drum set with only 57s for Red Hot Chili Peppers or something, which, of course, also taps into another question we're going to talk about later.
Look, I was blown away when I put one time this was a live application, but one time the kick drum mic broke and we didn't have anything else but a 57 or something, and we put a 57 inside the kick. I was blown away at how good it sounded.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got the right kind of mid-range. I mean, that's why there's a reason why you see 2 of them on the presidential podium for every speech, right?
Yep.
Oh shoot, what was I going to say about that? There was, I can't even remember now. I know what it was. It reminded me that when I was doing my Bonnaroo studio, David Rawlings and Gillian Welch came in. It was the David Rawlings Guitar Machine Band or something like that. And they came in and they were like, we just play around one mic. What have you got? And I started showing things, and he was like, SM57, that's the one. That's like one of my favorite. I think he was like, there's 2 great mics, and RCA44 and an SM57.
Boy, man.
And sure enough, they just stood around it in a circle, and it really did sound great.
And a 44 it's unbelievable how good it is. I found, and I'm telling you, Lidge, I have 100 stories like this. I found my 44 at a garage sale for $400. And
nice.
And it needed a new ribbon and a new cable. I sent it off to Wes Dooley's guys over at AEA, and they fixed it, and it sounds fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That freaking mic is like, it's almost my desert island mic. Like, it's, my desert island mic is a C37A, but it's up there. It really is up there.
The C37A is the Sony.
Correct.
And they just have this cool sound. I almost think of them as like a dark tube-ish 87 or something.
Yeah, to me, they're like...
Maybe not even dark. I don't know.
They are kind of dark. I find them to be kind of dark. Like, to me, they're great for all the same reasons why a 57 is great, because the mid-range is right. And they take EQ like nobody's business. So if you add a bunch of top into it, it doesn't... It doesn't start to degrade. It doesn't
it doesn't brittle out on you.
Right. Because that's look, a lot of these mics, if they're cheaper mics or Chinese mics or whatever, sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes, they'll sound fantastic going in, but the minute you start to add EQ, the whole thing falls apart.
Empirical Labs, creators of the famous Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio pros. The Fatso adds warmth to digital recordings with harmonic generation, tape emulation, and compression. The Pump, a 500 series compressor, features 8 selectable ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, and an attack mod for incredible transient control. The Arouser and Big Freak plugins are also available at empiricallabs.com, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle, featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects, perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Yeah, and thinking about that for a second, somebody might be like, well, why does that matter? It's just EQ. But what occurs to me is in the same way that sometimes there are things in your recording that won't be revealed, or they will be revealed in a bad way later when you compress and master and stuff like that. It makes sense with EQ. There might be things going on in the highs of a mic that are just being masked initially.
Right.
And when you EQ it, you're revealing them.
Correct.
And you just didn't know they were there.
Right. And then what happens is that when you add EQ or the, the quote, I'm putting air quotes, the air, that you want to put on the mic, it all of a sudden the whole thing just like becomes almost unusable, because
right.
and then you end up fighting it. You have 6 de-essers on it and all this, Yeah. So I recently did a session like that where I recorded with a couple of mics. I'm not going to say which ones. And they sounded fantastic going in. And then I end up putting a bunch, not a bunch, but I end up, adding EQ, whatever, to make the vocal pop out the mix or sound polished, because it was a pop song. And and I'm fighting P's and T's and S's and I'm going in and manually clip gaining everything down. And a lot of that has to do with the way the mic takes that stuff,
Yeah.
So C37s are one of those mics that just, you can shove it, up the ass of a guitar amp that's loud, or you can use it for vocals or even kick drum, and it sounds amazing.
Now, have you discovered any more recent, lower priced brands that really surprised you?
Okay.
I mean, does anything come to mind? If it doesn't, that's fine.
What's lower price? What are we?
Well, I mean, like the under 1,000 mics.
Okay. That keeps going away. Current mics, correct? Or do you want?
Yeah, just like current, new modern mics that you've been impressed with.
Okay, so one of them I'm using right now that I thought was fantastic for what it is. It's $100 mic. It's a Lewitt 240.
Yeah.
I bought one and I was blown away by it. I was like, wow, this already sounds. It definitely has a tipped up top right around 10K, but the rest of the frequency is very flat, and it
sounds great on your voice, by the way.
Yeah, it was. I used it. I remember I used it out of laziness as a scratch vocal for a project, and I remember then I used like the expensive, tube mic and whatever for the final vocal, and I remember going back to the scratch vocal and liking for that application, liking the way the 240 sounded better.
Yeah.
But I didn't have multiple takes on the 240, so I ended up having to go with the tube mic.
Now, was this for your voice or somebody else's?
It was a rock band. It was just the way that it was a girl singer. It was the way that it sat in the track. There was something about it. The way that I was like, damn, it sounds great just going in. Same thing with acoustic guitar. 240 is great on acoustic guitar. What?
That's cool to hear. I had an acoustic question for you about. Let me see, where was that one? Tiffany Pollock, Blues in My Blood.
Mm-hmm.
That one starts out with an acoustic, and those acoustics sound great. And is that you playing? Are you playing on some of these?
Me and Eric Johansson are playing on that. Eric does most of the guitar. I play bass on almost that whole record. And
cool.
And I'm a co-writer on that song and stuff. And I'm trying to remember what I used.
Well, it's all right. I don't mean to put guests on the spot with like, what exactly did you do? 7 years ago on a Tuesday.
I probably, if I did that at the Music Shed, I probably used I have a vintage pair of KM84s
Nice.
And I probably used a single KM84 on it. And I have a pair of 184s, and I think that those sound great too. So those are not sleeper mics by any stretch of the imagination. But I do have a couple of like I had somebody ask me, I did a record for a band called Flagship Romance a long time ago in 2012 or something, and they somebody had called me up and asked me about the acoustic sounds on that record, and I remember I did the entire record with an Alesis AM62 tube mic, which you can find now on Reverb for $300, and I have 3 of them. They're so good. And overheads, vocals, acoustic guitar, they're awesome.
What was it? The Alesis
AM62.
AM62. Well, Rockstars, I'm writing it down when we do the interview, so by the time you hear this, they might be gone.
And the FET versions, they have a FET version. It's the AM52, and I have those too. I have 2 of those and 3 of the 62s. Those mics, when Alesis was making those mics, back in those are like late 90s, early 2000s mics. They were $1,500 a piece, like the tube ones. Mm-hmm. And now they're just such sleepers. Nobody knows about them. And I'm telling you, they're great. I use them on piano, all sorts of shit.
Well, that's one of the fun things about making records these days and coming up in it. You might be a little bit overwhelmed with options, but my God, there's a lot of options out there. You have if you're starting out and recording now, you have no shortage of microphones, outboard gear, plugins, computers, ways to make records.
Another budget mic that I found great was the Aston Origin. I thought those were great.
Aston makes some great stuff.
They made that mic was very, unlike the Spirit, I felt like that mic was very flat, and that's what I liked about it. It wasn't
Which one is the Origin? Is that the one that looks like a... it's the small, with the laser on it?
Does it have a laser on it?
They made some with lasers to like point the mic.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Pointed at.
No, this one is, it's probably yay high. They kind of look like? They kind of look like a little bit like the Soyuz 1973 mic.
Right. This is what I was thinking of. And it's got that funky, like crisscross grid.
Yes, that's it.
It looks like that outdoor, the outdoor sculptural staircase near the Javits Center in New York that is closed down now because people were abusing it.
Well, they make 2 of them. They make the Origin and the Spirit. The Spirit looks like the same thing, but it's longer. It looks almost like a pipe bomb or something, or a C12, but it's not as thin as a C12.
Cool.
But that mic I thought was great too, because it was one of those ones that just sounded good on whatever. Now, the only thing I dislike about it is that the threads are to go on the mic stand are actually on the mic. So you just screw the mic on the mic stand. So that makes it very difficult to like pivot it like that.
It doesn't have the wrist
correct
like hinge to angle it.
So it's a little difficult to fly into certain places because it doesn't have a hinge. But other than that, I thought it's great.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. The Tiffany Pollack record, also another note I made was some great slide guitar on that. Which
that's all Eric Johansson.
That's Eric. But it made me want to ask the question to hit you with some guitar questions too, if that's fair.
Sure.
One of which is when we think about slide guitar parts and we're new to this, one of the questions is, should I be able to figure out how to play something cool in standard tuning, or do I need to start thinking about alternate tunings to start coming up with cool slide parts for this song that I'm doing, for example? Do you have any thoughts on that?
As a guitar player, I can play slide in either open tunings or in standard. I prefer to play in open tunings, obviously, because it's a lot more friendly. Right. You don't need to do as much muting with your right hand.
Right. Fewer of those half step jumps from string to string, which get weird.
Right. It's especially when you're dealing with chords. Like there are cats that can sort of turn their hand sideways and make really cool chords with one finger and their hand kind of turned like this. And, guys like Derek Trucks, I mean, he's the master in my opinion, as far as I've never heard anybody I don't know. I adore his slide playing more than almost anybody's. But yeah, I mean, I think that most of the slide work on that record was done in open tunings. But if I were you and you're a guitar player that's just starting out with slide, I would say try some open tunings because it will encourage you. You'll be able to make music, I think, a lot faster, than trying it with standard tunings. You'll be able to like listen to bands like the Black Crowes, listen to like Elmore James, listen to who else is an amazing slide player. I'm sort of coming up blank a little bit.
Putting you on the spot here, but one of the things about trying to play slide in standard tuning is I learned quickly that really like that the D, G, and B strings, essentially the open chord A shape.
Right.
Is the most useful one. And then everything else is sort of like a little oddball when I try to go to the other strings. And I guess if you go to open tuning, then everything on a single fret is going to make sense for that chord, that major chord.
Right. And let's put it like this. For slide, I think that I would honestly even be okay in standard tuning if you were able to tune the high E down to D. That way you'd be able to make chords with that high E string, and like it wouldn't, I don't know, it wouldn't be as difficult to me to keep trying to avoid that. It's easier to me to avoid the A and the E, the sixth string and the fifth string,
the low strings. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for touching on that. And then one more quick question. You mentioned earlier a Youngblood session, and maybe there's lots to say about this. But initially, there is a cool video on your TikTok, I think it was. And Rockstars, we have links to Jack's social media and his websites and stuff like that, including a playlist, which you can go check out all the music that we're talking about. So I encourage you to go do that, maybe after you listen to the podcast. And in that Youngblood video, it's great. It's like this live in-studio thing. And there's a bunch of kids singing on it. That was really, really cool. And it was also like, there was also a nice, there was a nice mashup of like, smarmy, like, I don't care about anything, a little bit anarchist, teen vibe with 10-year-olds singing the lyrics in the chorus, which is always sort of funny.
That was a fun day. I had been the engineer on the studio version of Low Life, and they did it at my spot in and it was funny because my spot's just a room, and it's got a lot of gear in it, but it's got a great vibe, and it's very Lanois-esque, whereas there's no separation of control room and live room. It's just all sort of together. So
right.
So, but that creates a very personal relationship, because you're working so closely with the artist, and there's not this divide. Lanois felt that he hated the divide between the control room and the live room.
I remember he brought everybody he was at the studio I interned at, Woodland Studios in Nashville, and at one point he brought everybody into the control room because it was too far away between control room and tracking.
So I have a studio that's like that, and we did that whole Low Life song, the studio version, in that little room, and then they wanted to do a version that was live in the studio with a whole band and a horn section. So I was a co-producer on that, where I'm the guy who like found all the horn players and wrote the horn arrangement, and I played bass on that. So that version that you're seeing at Maroney Studios, it's me on bass and my drummer from the Molly Ringwalds, Darren, on drums, and then it was Adam Warrington was the guitar player who's Youngblood's guitarist, and then all of the kids. We found a lot of the kids too. And then the horn players are on stage and everything. So that was the thing where it's just like we were talking about earlier at Studio in the Country, mic the whole room up. What you're hearing there is the actual recording. There's no overdubs. There's no anything. It's a single shot, and we get a take. And he's physically singing. All the kids are physically singing, and we're really playing. So
super cool.
So we just went there, and everybody learned the song on the spot, and Paul Meany's playing piano on it, and we just played it like a band.
It's so much fun to do things when every aspect of it is a performance. So, for example, you guys had to perform it musically, but the engineer or you...
I didn't engineer. Adam Keel engineered it.
Adam did. Okay, so Adam's having to also perform potentially a mix or get pretty close. And then the videographer, even the camera person, is having to do a performance because of the single shot. And in this camera, you see the shot like start out at some band and then look to the kids singing, and then it spins around and there's Youngblood coming at the camera for the next verse, you know, and it's just all dialed in like that. So it's very cool.
It was a lot of fun.
Definitely. I encourage you to check that out, Rockstars. It's in the show notes below.
Did you know that one of the most common fears with audio mastering is not knowing if your mix is ready or not? Look, nobody wants to send a mix in for mastering only to realize there's some resonating low end that's going on that wasn't picked up in the mix. That's where I come in. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. As soon as you send a mix for me to listen to, I'm already on your team. Mix feedback and master readiness is a service I offer for free and for good reason. That's because a great mix produces an even greater master. So if I can help you minimize oddities and issues and even provide some advice that will help your mix translate better, then mastering becomes more efficient and effective. And you don't stress about those issues at all. Just go to soundporter.com. There you can find videos, a FAQ, and a pre-mastering checklist on my website that will explain a lot of what you need to know. When you're ready for great feedback, just reach out via my low-friction contact form and send me a mix to hear. Again, you can find me at soundporter.com.
Are you sick of searching for the right cable only to realize it doesn't even exist? Or maybe you're asking yourself, how in the world do I hook my studio up? Well, say goodbye to those headaches, because Trace Audio can get you wired up right. Based in Nashville, but serving studios nationwide and around the world, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, labels, and wiring solutions. From labeling your patch bay to wiring your full studio or large format console, Trace Audio does it all, whether you're a home or pro studio owner. And the real game changer is Trace Audio's custom patch bay label designer. It's a one-stop tool to color code, organize, and design labels for your 1/4-inch or XLR patch bays. No more wondering where things are on your patch bay, when instead you can have sleek, professional labels that are easy to read and easy to use. Try the free online patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com and use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom labels and take your studio to the next level. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. And my guest today is Jack Miele, joining us from New Orleans, aka NOLA. And Jack, you ready to jam?
I am. I'm always ready.
Speaking of which, some of the bands that are in your playlist, I would call jam bands. Let's see, what was the Iceman Special? Dr. Dude's Masquerade, Parade.
Man, I'm practically the fifth member of that band. Like I've done so many records with those guys, and them and I just have we have a thing. We really do well together, and they're such a great band. And you want to talk about a band that just is, you can put them in a room and they can just go.
That stuff's so much fun too, and there's such a place in the world of music for a band that just feels good,
Yeah.
And too, because especially with the live stuff, with the festivals, it's good for us to remember that music is a feeling and a mood maker as well.
Yeah, and the Iceman guys are like, and not only are they a jam band, they're not really a jam. I guess they could be. They're more like, I call them psychedelic rock Cajun.
Nice.
Like they have songs where they're using washboards and stuff. Like they're really good at creating a vibe. That's what's so great about them.
Yeah.
And they have vision too. Like the Dr. Dude, like I remember when they brought that record to me, I straight up told them, I said, guys, I don't get this. I don't even understand. These songs to me are not as good as the first record. I don't get this. I became a believer once the whole project came together. But I didn't understand at first conceptually what they were going for. And this last record I just did with them, Zycordia, I think is one of the strongest ones we've ever done.
Right on. Do you feel like there's sometimes a thing that has to be figured out between what you're going to do in the studio and what might work for a band as a live performance?
Yeah, I mean, you mean like, do I feel like instead of just going in and blindly recording, like you talk about as a producer, evaluating the songs, like how is this going to go over live? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or vice versa. Like, for example, when you said, I don't get this, you know, my imagination went to a band maybe saying, oh, you need to come see our live show to understand how this all goes together or something.
I see.
I'm making this up, but I mean, I think that is a kind of a topic we might be familiar with.
There are some times where I've been in the studio and we're doing stuff, and I worked with a band called Neon Luck where they had a song called Babyface, which I just did, and the song was real chill, real kind of vibey. It almost reminded me of almost like a G Love and Special Sauce kind of thing,
right? Yeah.
And then, but they're like, no, we want the end to be heavy. And I'm like, I don't understand. I don't feel that. But then I saw them play it live, and then I understood what they were saying. Like it's this thing, like, cause it almost, like I said, it almost reminded me of like Citizen Cope or something, or and then but then it escalates to where the whole thing got really heavy at the end, you know? So that was something that I had to hear it live in order to understand what we were going for.
That's cool. Yeah. G Love and Citizen Cope, those are two artists I had the pleasure of recording in my Bonnaroo studio.
Oh, that's great.
I had known G Love, of course, because I was like, in fact, when he came in, I convinced him to do Funky Cold Beverage for us. But Citizen Cope, I was introduced to at the Bonnaroo Festival, and then after that, I was just hooked.
Oh, they're great, man. So on the G Love tip, Jeff Clemens is a good friend of mine. And
he's up here in Nashville, right?
Yeah, he is. And actually, I hung out with him not that long ago when I was up there, and but he's great and love his drumming. It's unbelievable the way he's got such a thing, you know, when he plays. And Cope, I'm good friends with Mark Broussard, and when Mark did a run with Cope when Cope was an opener, he was opening for Mark, and man, I was hooked from the first record. I thought such a great thing. Do you know what's going on with Cope right now? What's he?
I don't know. No, I mean, I just loved what I heard early on. This is many years ago.
Yeah, that second record, the Clarence Greenwood record, that record's incredible to me, masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, so we haven't really talked much about your studio now, so I thought I'd ask you about that. Do you want to tell us about your studio where you're working now? Let's say somebody wanted to come make a record with you. Where might they be making a record?
So they would be making a record in it's a room that's in the old Music Shed complex, and right now the room is, like I said, it's Landwine style. It's got, you know, it's one room with no separate control room. It does have a couple of ISO booths, but that being said, we are expanding, and I have. Basically, we're going to have a separate live room that is in the process of being put together right now. But I have made, you know, like on that list that you've heard, probably 50% of the stuff was made in that room, and it does have I have an old modified TAC Matchless in that room, and that sounds great. And another great console that I feel like gets overlooked a lot. It's not a Scorpion. The Scorpions are definitely different animals because I own one of those too. It's got a lot of outboard gear, a lot of mics, have a B3, Whirly, Rhodes, piano, you know, and a lot of guitar amps, obviously, and a lot of guitars. And it's one of those rooms where, you know, it's a small space. So what I can do is I usually will record drums, bass, guitar, and if there's piano, I'll probably track the piano on keyboard and then overdub the piano.
Yeah, piano is one of those ones. I also have a small space where the drums are close to the piano, unless I put the drums in the dead ISO room.
Right.
And it's tricky because the piano becomes the room mics for the drums.
Mm-hmm. That's
in my
right.
experience. So you have to like make sure that that's a good matchup Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
The guys at Sun Studios actually told me that whenever they do a session with drums and piano, they'll move the piano as close to the drums as possible, so that it becomes like one instrument.
Yeah.
And the cymbal, basically the piano becomes the cymbal mics is what ends up happening. But it's but they said that also because of the timbre of the two things, the cymbals and the piano, it works together. And I couldn't mentally hear it in my head, but that's what they said they do. And so they'll actually like try to put the piano right next to the drums. But at my space, I've gotten great results. We have a long corridor that gets up to the room that has about a 4-second decay time. And it's incredible sounding. And if you listen to that song that you were referring to, Blues in My Blood, like the whole breakdown section in the middle where you can hear the drums and you hear like it sounds like the cannon drums. That's all that hall. That's that hallway.
Wait, that's the American Horror Story, Gods and Monsters?
No. That's it's the Blues in My Blood, the Tiffany Pollack record.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
And also you can hear it very prominently on. I just did a record with a band called Painted Shield. It's Stone Gossett from Pearl Jam's side band, and Matt Chamberlain was on drums on that. And there's a whole section in the middle where you can hear these giant like the giant cannon snares, and that's all real. It's not manufactured inside of Pro Tools. It's like real sounds that are tracked in that hallway.
So what's the way to mic something like that up?
Not close. We mic the hallway and we just leave the door cracked. Then we put the drums inside of we're basically making a reverb chamber is what we're doing. The reverb chamber is just sharing a wall. And it kind of reminded me of like, of the way that like Blackbird has it, like where you walk in between the studios and you actually walk through the reverb chamber. I think that's between studio A and B. I can't remember, but but there's like a reverb chamber with the ceiling that you can make higher or lower so you can control the decay time. And they'll either leave that door open or they'll close it, and that becomes your reverb chamber. We had the same thing at the music show. We had a little vestibule that was like a walk between to get to the mic cabinet, and it was all concrete. And we would close the doors and we would mic that vestibule, and it had a short decay time, but it still added that dimension. If I can't stress this enough to your listeners, the room is your friend. You need to create a Z-axis. That's what creates depth. If everything is close mic'd, that you don't get depth, and that's the secret sauce. The secret sauce
just get congestion.
Right. The secret sauce is distance. Like a lot of times when I'm micing guitar amps, I don't just put close mics. You put mics 6 feet or 6 feet back, 4 feet back. Nobody listens to a guitar amp with their head all the way up against the grill. So why would you want that to be the way it sounds? Now, if you were looking for something that sounds manufactured, then, that's cool because a lot of modern music, that's what it's all about. But if you're looking to try and capture the way something sounds naturally, then you need to capture it the way a human ear would hear it.
Yeah. I've got an ISO booth that's kind of essentially a dead room. It's all softs and 703 everywhere. And the guitar cabinets end up in there a lot. And so by default, I tend to think like 2 guitar amps. We'll just use 257s pan left and right. And to be totally fair, there is a little bit of bleed between guitars, which can happen, which can be a good thing to give a tiny bit of wideness. But I think I need to follow your advice and just be more, think outside the box. Just be like, what happens if I stick 2 mics up in the farthest corners of this room?
Right, exactly.
Blend those in as well.
Like, here's some examples. Think about the guitar sound to Money for Nothing from Dire Straits, that guitar intro. You can tell that's not close mic'd. That's something that's in the room. Even Clapton would say that he doesn't want the amp close mic'd. He would mic it 4 feet back, because that's the way that a person would hear it, because once you get that distance, air being moved. That's what you're trying to capture, is that air being moved off the speaker cone. and you get a proximity effect thing too. When you put the mic, really, really close to the speaker, all of a sudden, especially if it's a cardioid mic, now you've got all this 100 built up in the guitar amp, in the guitar mics.
Yeah. I mean, not to totally discount the 57 on the amp grill, because that is a usable color and a sound.
It's amazing.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, there's an artist, Hunter Cross, that I work with here, and we've been recording his guitars pretty much in that room, pretty much close mic'd. Maybe we use 2 amps or something like that, so it's more stereo. But then when I saw him perform at a live show here, and his amp was turned up, and I was standing out in the audience, I was like, holy shit, there's a whole level of guitar sound that we're not even tapping into,
right,
that I'm hearing you do right now. And it was really eye-opening for me. So again, another great reason to get your ass out of the studio and go see live music sometimes, just because you might not know what you're missing in the studio.
And look, there is also phasing to be considered, but the way that I'll do it is I'll usually use a 57, a biodynamic M160 taped together so that the capsules are touching, and then I'll use something back, an 87, like a vintage 87 or a C37, or I'll even sometimes use a 57 and a C37 on the guitar. That's really my favorite, is a 57 and a C37 on the guitar amp, and then use something back, a ribbon mic, 44, 77, something just back. And you blend those 3 together, and you just have to be careful of the phasing, but you blend those 3 together and you'll get a much more 3-dimensional sound. Do you
scoot that back mic around a bunch of times, or do you just kind of eyeball it?
I kind of eyeball it. What I'll do is, this sounds so amateur, but use your head. I don't mean think. You physically use your head. Move your head.
The amp sound good,
right? Move your head around until it sounds good. And then you say, okay, I like the way it sounds right here. So technically, if you put the mic right where your head is, it's probably going to sound like the way you're hearing it, so, or at least in the ballpark, so that's, I do that a lot. If I don't necessarily know how to mic something, whether it's a horn or so, I'll tell somebody, just go ahead and play. And I'll take my ear and I'll move my ear around until it sounds, like I said, it sounds almost juvenile, but it really does work.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think sometimes we get stuck on thinking we're supposed to be more science than we need to be. It's just art. And there's science in it, but this is a lot of our artistic decision.
Agree. And I think that one of the biggest shortcomings that I see, with people who are up and coming in this industry, is that most people who are, neophytes to this, they don't understand what actually sounds good. They can't tell that when you listen to, when they listen to a record, they can't tell the Fleetwood Mac's Rumors is a masterpiece sonically, or, these records are masterpieces and this record is not so much of a masterpiece. No, why? What's the, so when you hear somebody hit a snare drum and you're miking it with a 57 because that's what you read that you were supposed to mic it with, and they hear it and they're unable to decipher whether or not it actually sounds good or not. What is quote unquote good, so
it takes a lot of training, a lot of listening and experience until, I found myself walking in and hearing something come out of the speakers and knowing right away that doesn't sound right to me.
Right. And it's that you can't get it other than experience and listening. I had an intern one time come in, and he had graduated from one of the colleges, and I asked him, I said, at that college, I said, how many critical listening classes did you have to take? And he said, none. I said, really? There's no critical listening class that goes, okay, today we're going to study the mixes of Chris Lord-Alge or the mixes of, Bob Clearmountain or whoever. And why are these mixes? Why do the same 6 or 7 guys, get the biggest records? You got guys like Clearmountain and Andy Wallace and Andrew Sheps and Ryan Hewitt and all these guys, because they're brilliant and they know what they're doing, and there's a consistency. They have quantifiable results. So
yeah. Well, it's funny to think about critical listening. That also sometimes sounds like a scary word. Like, what am I not? Do I not know how to say the right frequency names? But I think there's also an element to the critical listening that naturally comes when you turn a knob and something comes out of your speaker, and then you do it a different day, and something different comes out of your speaker, and then you realize this one sounds better than that one, and hopefully you remember how the hell you did those two things, so that on day 3 you come in and you're like, I'm going to skip, the first day, and we'll run with the thing I did on the second day or whatever.
Yeah, it took a lot of years for me to realize, like, and it sounds stupid, but like, okay, you get a kick drum and you hit the kick drum and it doesn't sound good for some reason. And what do instead of like I would do everything, change the mic, change the pre, change the EQ the crap out of it, change the compressor. The one thing we're not doing is changing the drum, tune the drum, change the drum, maybe the drum sounds like shit. Now
maybe the drummer sucks.
Right. There is something to be said about knowing how to hit a drum. Like there are certain guys that when they play, it's like they're automatically compressing the drums with their touch, and when you get a drummer who comes in, they don't know how to hit the drums right. And it's just, it sticks out and things poke out. The cymbals are harsh sounding. Like there's really something to be said about guys that come in who are super pro guys and they know how to hit drums and make them sound good just in the room.
Atom Audio is proud to announce the new D3V active desktop monitor system and H200 dynamic closeback studio headphones designed in Berlin and perfect for pro-level monitoring in a home studio setting. The D3V is a fully active desktop monitoring system featuring 3.5-inch woofers and hand-folded ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact form in elegant white or black finish. It's perfect for songwriters, producers, podcasters, and mixers with digital input over USB-C or balanced analog inputs, and includes a headphone output and DSP room acoustic switches. The H200 is Atom Audio's new closed-back studio headphone, featuring 40mm peak drivers and memory foam ear pads in a durable metal construction with a detachable main cable for dual-sided connectivity, making the H200s reliable for demanding studio use. With an impedance of just 32 ohms, they will sound great with your studio or laptop and include a plug-in for enhanced tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot. To see the new D3V monitors and H200 headphones, go to atomaudio.com. iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks or mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, referencing a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma Ozone RX or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Yeah, it's interesting. The drum thing's always fun to talk about because it's one of the more complex instruments we're faced with in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like I agree with you. There's an initial discovery that like, oh, if you make the drums sound a certain way, then that sound can translate onto a lot of different mic possibilities,
right,
and come out of the speaker sounding cool. And then there's that level where you're like, okay, maybe and you play some drums too, right, Jack?
I do.
Yeah. So then there can be that level where you're like, okay, I know what sounds good, but now I'm faced with, am I good enough to physically take after take and in the moment hit it the way I would like it to sound? And then there's the question of, when I put on the headphones and everything's loud and gets, we go into this world of chaotic, am I even hearing it to hit it the right way? So many levels and layers.
And then there's another level of, once you get it to sound the way you want from the way you're hitting it, can you deliver the performance?
Yeah. Yep.
There's that too. Are you playing with emotion? Are you serving the song? Does the song really want eighth notes on the hi-hat in the verse, or should it be quarter notes?
Yeah.
Should you play the bell or the meat of the ride cymbal? Should the drums be more dead? Should we use towels? Should we, there's all of these factors of, like, once you got a good sound, there are so many things that you can do just as a player to change it, that, there's a session that I'm going to be doing upcoming where I want the drums to sound a certain way, and I want them. What I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to do the Upagem thing, where I'm going to track the whole drum set without cymbals, and then I'm going to go back and do a cymbals pass. Because
I didn't know that was a Hugh Padgham trick.
Well, yeah, all of those records, like the Phil Collins, thing, like where they do like the big drums, whatever. There's no cymbals on any of that stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I think Upagem was the engineer on that. I think he was. You'd have to double check for me on this. Maybe you could put it in the disclaimer.
Yeah, but I'll type it in. But I mean, regardless, the concept is the part.
Right.
Part.
Like, I was going to say that Melting Face Peter Gabriel record, the one that Steve Lillywhite produced, there's no cymbals on that either. It's like they have these great drum sounds, but there are no cymbals on it. And so, like, when you listen to like Intruder and I Don't Remember and stuff, there's just no cymbals anywhere. And I know that they even did that on the So record for Peter Gabriel, because when Lanois did it, if you read the credits, you'll see the drummer is one guy, and then they hired Stuart Copeland just to play hi-hats.
Oh, that's great.
So because they loved his hi-hat work, but they didn't want him on the rest of the drum parts, so they used, I don't know if it's Tony Visconti. I don't know who. I don't remember who did the drums on that, but I know that, like, on Red Rain and stuff, that's Stuart Copeland playing hi-hats.
Yeah, I just Googled Hugh Padgham and drums and cymbals, and articles popping up saying that Peter Gabriel wanted no cymbals, strictly toms.
Oh, no kidding.
But I don't remember which record that is. But anyway,
that's the third Melting Face record. It's the one where half his face is melting on the front.
Oh, right. Yep. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's on that record. That's an incredible sounding record. And another record that was tracked where they did a separate pass for each was the Songs for the Deaf, the Queens of the Stone Age record.
Yeah, I think it was that Eric Valentine or Trina Shoemaker.
I think Trina did Rated R. I know Trina.
Yeah.
And I think she did Rated R, and I guess the other guy did the other one. I'm not sure who did it. But yeah,
but it's a fun thing, and I've explored that and made just an absolute pile of shit out of the idea, which was fine. It wasn't the right session to figure it out on, but it was fun to just try stuff like that out. So Rockstars, just to clarify, next time you do a drum session, if you want to explore this, maybe don't do it on a critical session where it's going to crash and burn if it doesn't work.
Or maybe what you do is you do half of it, meaning like, just use hi-hat and ride and no crash cymbals.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Because crashes do get all over the place. That and open hi-hats.
Right. And and also think about the way crash cymbals are placed. They're these giant sonic umbrellas. You know, so the sound of the physical drum that gets into the overhead is being blocked by these sonic umbrellas that are reverberating or resonating underneath the cymbal itself.
Yeah. So try removing the cymbals, maybe try removing all the cymbals and then just playing a drum part without any cymbals, and then you can overdub the cymbals afterwards. Or sometimes people have to tap on their leg in between and
right
to mimic what the hi-hat would have done.
Or you take, I sometimes like, you can have some bundled like towels and stuff, and you put them on the cymbal stand so that they actually have something to hit.
Yeah.
So
and the next thing you know, then you're listening, you're like, I think I hear your stick hitting the towel, and then it turns into that nonsense. Tell us about NOLA. Tell us about New Orleans and where you are and what it's like to be in that music scene and make a record right there.
So this is, it was funny. I was speaking to somebody about this earlier today. We're in a city that has, I would think per capita, probably more musicians than almost any place. I'm talking about like for the size of the city and how many people are here and the percentage of musicians that are here. Like Nashville is obviously flooded with musicians, and so is LA and Vegas or whatever. But but New Orleans is a small city. Mm-hmm. It's a very small city. It's the kind of city that nobody from here, like, so you're in Nashville and they have Franklin and Brentwood and all these other places or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they do have places like north of the lake in New Orleans, like Covington and Mandeville and stuff. But most of the people who are in New Orleans, like they even like thumb their nose at like Metairie, the suburb right outside of it a lot of times. And people here are not used to driving. Like they're not used to the distance. Like when you go to LA and you know, everything is so spread out, so there's traffic everywhere. And in New Orleans, it doesn't take longer than 10 or 15 minutes to get anywhere, so when
that's what it used to be in Nashville.
Yeah. I was just in Nashville recently, and it was, it was crazy. I was blown away by the amount of people. And so that being said, there are an amazing amount of people here. There is right now, I would venture to say, a studio deficit here. I feel like for the amount of musicians that we have versus the amount of studios that we have, I feel like there is a deficit. Like when you go to Nashville,
Rockstar's call to action right there.
Well, when you go to Nashville, there's a studio in every corner, it seems.
Yeah.
It's just not like that here. And I think that a lot of I'll put the air quotes up again, players love to come here. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of gigs constantly happening. There's music every night of the week, whether it's on Bourbon or Frenchman or side gigs or weekend gigs. There's a lot of cover bands everywhere. There's, so there is a lot of live music here.
My brother had a good quote about New Orleans. He said, if you're a tuba player, you are never without a gig.
Yeah. Another one is a keyboardist.
Same thing.
There's a lot of, I call New Orleans the land of drummers. You're talking about some of the best drummers in the world, all just in one spot.
Yeah.
So my friend Doug Belote actually is doing a documentary on New Orleans drummers. But I think it's almost ready to be released. But
now, did we cut it short when we were talking about drums? We talked about this no cymbals technique. And you did talk about changing the kick drum, but when it does come to things like mics and room mics, and when you're talking about a one-room studio, and I'm thinking about the funk element down there too, just kind of reminds me of Al Evans talking about recording drums with a single mic in the middle of the kit and stuff like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about some drum recording methods? Well,
so I've done everything from 2 mics on the whole kit to 22 mics, and we'll call it my modus operandi, my MO that I generally use at this point, because it changes, every year it changes. Like, I would do 3 mics on the kick. I would do kick in. I would use a PZM for the beater, or a 58 or 57, literally just inside the drum.
So that's the trick where the PZM just lays on the bottom, on the floor of the drum on something soft.
Yeah, right. Just put a pillow inside the drum or something and lay it on that. And then I roll everything from like 500 hertz or 600 hertz down off. And so it becomes your beater mic. And then I've got a kick-in mic, which will either be a D12, D112, D6. I even like the cheap Audix one, the F12. I think is a criminally underrated mic. ATM 25 is great. A Beyer M88, any of those on the end.
Rolling mic names off the tongue, man.
So, oh yeah, I'm an encyclopedia of mics, definitely. But any of those would be great. For out mic, depending on what the session is, if it's a rock session where the drums are supposed to be real close sounding, I might use a sub kick, or I might use I would either use some sort of FET condenser, whether it's I love United Technologies FET 47 that they make is fantastic. I think another sleeper one that I think nobody uses is a Blue Mouse. I think that's a great mic for that application. Snare, I would use 3 mics. I would either use either a 57 and an M160 on the top and a 57 on the bottom, or I would use a 57 on the top. I just used an Aston Origin on the top and it sounded great. And I also use sometimes a C37 on the top. So you have one sort of pointed at the drum and then one like shooting across the top of the drum. You just have to make sure that the capsules are close, or if not perfectly lined up, if you can. Toms,
right, because you don't want the transient of the snare hitting both capsules of the mic, and then now they're coming at it slightly different times.
Which creates a phasing. Yeah, you get comb filtering and stuff like that, and it sounds funny when it's not perfect.
That would smear the attack of the drum image.
Correct. Thank you for explaining that, because I gloss over that. I gloss over that like everybody's supposed to know that. That's
my job on this. I'm supposed to be the guy who comes in, asks the dumb questions, and says everything.
So toms. So there was a time in my life where I refused. I was like, I'm never going back. I my top and bottom toms. You don't realize how much of the low end comes from the bottom.
Yeah.
So I would, 421 the top, and then I would put like just a cheap Fusion mic, on the bottom or whatever, just to get that. And you have to make sure you flip the phase on the bottom.
Yeah. And now, just to add to that, that top and bottom tom miking is one of those techniques that you might be more inclined to use on your sessions if you're working with a console, because you can blend them together and record them down to one tom track. Or do you actually take them into Pro Tools separate?
Separate. I take them into Pro Tools separate.
Right on.
And then I'll blend them afterwards. And they never ever get, in my mix sessions, they never get malted down. They stay separate. So you can, if you have a lack of converters and you have a sub mixer, you could do that. Like even if you have a little cheap Mackie or something, you can, like, so for your listeners that might be home recording guys, if you got like one of those Fusion packs that has like, 6 or 8 mics in it or whatever, you top and bottom the toms and put them into a little cheap mixer and make sure you flip the phase so that the phase is correct and you get a good sound, and then send the outputs of that to 2 channels. Just pan, 4-piece drum kit. You have 1 tom and 1 floor. Pan 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Pan the floor to the right and the other one to the left, and now you have 2 separate tracks that are malted together, 4 channels.
Do you like doing drummer's perspective versus audience perspective? When it depends on
the session. I use both. Jazz records, I tend to almost always use audience. If it's a rock record, I like to use drummer perspective more. Do you think there's a logic to that? Is it like habit? Is it familiarity? It's more familiarity. It's like, I listen to, it's funny because I start to listen to certain records. Like if you listen to all those Rush records, they're all Neil Peart's drums. They're all audience perspective.
Are they really?
Yeah. When he plays YYZ, the toms roll down from the right to the left, So, but then when you listen to, I was listening to some records. I think it was Aerosmith. I think it might have been like Toys in the Attic or something. I was listening, and I don't quote me on Toys in the Attic, but I can't remember what it was. But it was some record from the 70s. I was very surprised that it was drummer perspective, and because the drummer perspective thing is a very modern kind of thing, in my opinion. The reason why you have it is because you have a bunch of guys who are drummers, and like me, I'm a drummer. So I naturally, when I listen to drums, I want to hear it the way that I hear it sitting behind the kit. So that's probably one of the reasons why I enjoy drummer perspective, because as a drummer, I want to hear the drums roll from left to right, because that's the way I play. And when I'm sitting behind drums, that's the way I hear it.
Yeah.
But so I find that metal records and heavier records tend to be drummer perspective, but there's no logic behind it to me. It's just a preference. But I know that it would be, back in the 60s, it would be, or the 70s was really when they started multi-tracking toms and stuff like that. 60s was a little too early, but it would be seen as almost an amateur hour kind of thing to drummer perspective, the toms.
Elevate your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your creative vision to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, crafting deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with unique sound design, Complete 15 has got you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound even further. Then, polish off your mixes with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11, included in the Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Empirical Labs, creators of the iconic Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio professionals. The Fatso, or Full Analog Tape Simulator and Optimizer, brings the warmth of vintage tape and tube electronics to your digital recordings. Perfect for mixes, masters, or overdubs by adding harmonic generation, high-frequency saturation, tape emulation, and compression. The impressive new Pump, a 500 series classic knee compressor, shares its DNA with the analog Distressor and Arouser plugin. It features 8 selectable compression ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, a high-pass filter, and a first-time ever attack mod for added transient control, which is ideal for adding more snap to your snare drum. All Empirical Labs products are hand-assembled and tested right down to the circuit boards in northern New Jersey, USA, for durability and performance, designed to last and be easily updated. Go to empiricallabs.com to find the Arouser and Big Freak plugins, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Remember to follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Yeah, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. It's the drummer's perspective in the production phase of the mixing. And it probably is a testament to multi-track studios and bringing musicians in to produce their own records too. And records where you're really zoning in and paying attention to what's each instrument doing. A Rush album. Oh no, you said it with Rush though. It was the other.
It was
way.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah. So fascinating.
So now what's funny is that I just recently did Johnny Vidakovich, the famous jazz drummer. He's amazing, jazz and funk or whatever drummer. But I did his record and his solo record. And I remember when I went to go mix it, I called him up. I said, Johnny, I said, how do you want this mix? Do you want an audience or drummer perspective? He didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, he's like, he says, what's the difference? And I said, well, when you hear the toms roll down, when you do a fill, or when you hit the 4 tom, what speaker do you want to? And I totally blew his mind. He had never thought about it. And I'm like, how do you not think about this as a drummer? But he, so he didn't care. So I said, okay, well, I think I mixed the drummer perspective. I think, although I've done 2 other records with him where I mixed them audience perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. And a closing thought on that is when you're in a control room and you're looking out the glass, do you see the drummer looking towards you in the session, or are you looking over the drummer's back in the session? Because maybe that's where it appeared originally on records.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It kind of, for me personally, it kind of depends. Like in my room, I'm almost on top of the drummer. So it's like, when we're tracking drums. So it's like, I tend to move those. I tend to answer those kinds of questions with what style is the track. It's a stylist. It's a musical stylistic thing to me.
That's a good way to look at it. Let me go to this question. Okay. Sugar Bowl, Shadow and the Thrill. Mm-hmm. Powerful vocal. Is that you, or is that somebody?
No, that is the vocal is Tony Cardenas, aka Tony Montana. Tony is the guitarist in Jack Russell's Great White and was the bassist in Great White in the 80s, like for all the key records, Once Bitten, Twice Shy and all that stuff. So he's in the videos and stuff. Well, he was in Great White for years. And then when the Great White split happened, he went with Jack Russell's side. So, because now there are two factions, there's Great White and Jack Russell's Great White. So Tony wanted to do a solo record, and he wanted it to be like under a band moniker. So we did it. I produced alongside of Tony and Brent Arsement, and we did it in my little room, and it sounds good. Sylvia Massey mixed it, and Vlado Meller mastered it.
So one of the questions, well, it sounds great.
Thank you.
And one of the questions that popped into my mind as I listened to it, which typical for me is like, Lidge, don't ask another question about drums, but was, the vocal. So when you have a powerful singer, what are some of the things that, maybe we're used to recording our own, more quiet voices. Maybe we're recording indie bands and things like that in our home studios. And then in walks a session to record an opportunity to record a powerful singer. What's some of the stuff we want to think about in terms of mic choice?
It's so funny.
Stuff like that.
It's so funny you're asking this about that record, because I had Tony on some of the songs wanted to take it back to his, like I did all the instruments and stuff, and Tony wanted to do the vocals on some of the stuff by himself because he wanted to take it home and he wanted to play with it and have the perfect performance and whatever. So he wanted to use some of my gear to do this, right? And I remember just fighting him because I was like, man, this is a terrible idea to use this. But we used a TLM 103 and an API. And I, for that kind of vocal, a TLM 103 is not the mic I would have picked, because it's got this presence peak right around 3K that I think is probably going to be a little harsh for that. I would have probably used an SM7 or something. But he did it. We got it. Sylvia wrangled it in. It sounded great. He's also a great singer. He knows how to work a microphone. He knows how to, so Tony, I didn't have to worry about him because he's such a veteran. He just knew how to capture his voice and capture, with whatever he had. Did it sound like a TLM 103? It did, but luckily, like I said, Sylvia is a master and she made it sound great. And it didn't sound bad. It just sounded a little brighter than I would have. For rock, I like things to kind of sink into the track a little bit. I like C37s. I like SM7s. I like even who gets the top in a rock? The cymbals or the vocal? Or the guitars? Probably the cymbals. I think probably the cymbals. The key is, and generally you don't want the cymbals to be brighter than the vocal, but and I don't like really super bright cymbals. They'll rip. I call them the razor blades. They'll rip your head off. So for overheads, I'll either use Cole's 4038s, or sometimes Soyuz has a pair of FET pencil mics that I think sound great that aren't super strident sounding. And so I'll use those. I think they're called the 013s. Sometimes I use those for overheads, or KM84s, something like that. I don't like, Now, if you want to use 87s, I'm fine with 87s if they're vintage. I don't like 87 AIs for overheads at all. I tend to fight with them almost all the time because they're.
So the Soyuz 013, it's a small diaphragm tube condenser mic.
Well, they make a tube and a FET.
Would you be selective between tube and FET?
Well, I only have the FET, so
okay, great.
So
okay, there you go. Oh yeah, you did say FET microphone.
Yeah, it's an easy choice for me. I only own the FET.
I like that. Well, there's a lot of easier choices in our studio.
Yeah.
Some of them are, do you have it already?
You know, those Alesis AM60s, a lot of this has to do with how do these large diaphragm condensers handle transients? Yeah. Like, are they if you get a microphone that's very spiky, you know, with the transient, then I don't like them because when the stick, especially when the stick is hitting the ride, I feel like it's poking me in the center of the head, you know, right. Like it's, so I like cymbals to try and be as smooth as possible. Vocals, I don't usually have vocals in a rock record super bright. And I will even sometimes roll off some of that really bright stuff up in the top. I also record, you know, I record a lot of stuff at 48. I'm not one of these guys that records everything at 96. Some stuff gets recorded at 96.
I tried 3296 until I couldn't finish my mixes, and I went back to 24.
Right,
48.
right. It just becomes an albatross to try and, like, the computer is just basically bird fingering you while you're doing it. So, you know, I try to record at 48. I like the way rock sounds at 48. Another thing is because it's at 48, you got to watch out for the aliasing. You got to, because the Nyquist point is only at what is it? I think that the
22.
Well, yeah, 22.
24.
24K is the Nyquist point. So anything above that, you're just going to get digital distortion. So you start to roll that stuff off and things start to sound smoother, like tape, you know, and because tape can't produce all that, you know, so that I end up doing that kind of stuff anyway. So with vocals, I like to have a good, strong mid-range for rock. I like to use a little bit of distortion and overdrive, and I'll use that usually on a separate track. And because that's another thing that a lot of young engineers don't realize, that distortion, the right kind of distortion, is your friend. You know, you want to, if everything is too clean, it doesn't, and I'm not talking about distortion like a guitar distortion, I'm talking about low-level distortion, saturation, even in odd harmonics, things like that. Those types of distortions really make something jump out. Like one plugin that I love for this is there's actually a few. I love what's the one from SPL, the Twin Tube. I think. Oh,
right. Yep. Yeah, I know that one.
Super underutilized plugin. I love that plugin. I love the one from Plugin Alliance, the yellow box, the Vertigo.
Let me look it up.
It's definitely Vertigo. It's like VT3 or VS3 or something.
Yeah, Plugin Alliance. I'm trying to memorize them all, but there's a lot of options. A VSM3.
Yep, that's it. That one's great. My friend Maurer Applebaum's The Oven. That one is fantastic. You know,
now that one's pretty subtle. That one, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but when I was playing with it, I felt like I really needed to, like, pay attention to understand how to start using it. Yeah,
the thing about that one, it wasn't as, I didn't, well, even the Vertigo, the yellow one, I found like I had to originally, I was like, this thing's worthless. And then I watched a YouTube video on it and I was like, whoa, this is great, you know. But Maurer's is it's when you start multiplying it across tracks. You know,
interesting. Okay.
That's when you really start to hear this thing come alive. Like you put it on snare, kick, tom, whatever, or the group, you know, it's really great. That one, if you haven't tried this one, another great low DSP one that I love is, I still love the Massey tape head. It's It's a tiny little plug-in with two knobs, and it sounds awesome to me.
That was all I had for a long time until I finally upgraded to.
Yeah, right.
I don't remember what.
The Decapitator, probably.
Up above High Sierra. Once I left High Sierra on my Mac, I think I started having all kinds of other plug-in options.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of, and you know, I love the nonlinear channels from Waves. Those are great. And another one, because I'm a Waves endorsee and a McDSP endorsee, and one that McDSP has that's fantastic is their analog channel, the Analog 2. It's the green.
Right, and that's been around for ages.
Yeah, and it's just, once again, it's one of those, I don't want to call it a sleeper plugin, but it's one of those ones that you just start throwing it around on the mixes, and all of a sudden things start to kind of sound glued together and punchy and beautiful in a good way. It's
one of those fun things about discovering about plugins too, is that just like analog gear, not all new plugins blow away the old plugins.
Right.
I don't want to say it like that because there's so many great new plugins. But in the same way that you discover there's some old microphones that are sleepers, there's old gear that maybe aren't even sleepers. They sounded great a long time ago. They still sound great. It's the same thing with digital. There are a whole collection of plugins and digital items that sounded great a long time ago, and they still sound great, like McDSP analog channel.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was telling the guys over at Waves, I said, man, your black SSL-E channel, that it was the first plugin I ever bought. I remember going to Guitar Center and I had to buy a faux box that had a receipt in the side of it that had the serial number. I bought it for $700. It was like $699 for that plugin that they sell for like $20 now or something.
Yeah.
But man, did I use the hell out of that thing, and I still do. It's still one of my go-to. And I remember Guitai over at Waves told me, he said they modeled that plugin, that E channel, after I think it's William Orbit's SSL E channel that he used for Ray of Light, the Madonna record.
Wow.
So he said that's what that channel is modeled after. They used his console to get the sound on it.
That's amazing. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio using free and stock plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can use the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. For 15 years, I owned a famous MCI console that came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made many Grammy-winning records in the 1970s, and it sounded amazing. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to full digital mixing, I decided to team up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. This isn't just another boring plugin. The MBSI captures that same iconic sound that was used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, produced by Bill Simzik, Saturday Night Fever and Stayin' Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, and was loved by legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik, to name just a few. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a high and low-pass filter switch. Features I always wished that the console had. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio, just like me. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound. Go to makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Well, and it just goes to show that even in the world of digital, it's the people behind it that are making smart choices that ultimately result in a great plugin or a great DAW or a great whatever instrument, you know?
Right. And it's like, just like there'll always be a need for a fork, like
Right.
it's something that we've all been using forever. It's like, but there's just certain plugins that just they're standards, you just need them, like RVox,
Yeah.
it's a plugin that's been around forever. That's like it's still one of Waze's best selling plugins, I think.
Rockstars, you're hearing RVox on our voices right now.
I didn't even know that.
Well, by the time this gets mixed.
Gotcha.
So Jack, I got one closing question for you, and I want to thank you again for doing this podcast with us. It's a super pleasure to meet you. Really fun to just talk about making records with you, and your enthusiasm is infectious. So we really appreciate
thank
this.
you.
Let's take the Wayback Studio Machine. This hypothetical question. You get to go back in time and find young Jack. And you say, listen, Jack, you don't know Jack, but I've come back to tell you what you should know. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you feel like going back and giving yourself if you could?
Okay. I'm trying to, I will say this. I'm not necessarily unhappy with any decisions that I've made. So,
especially being on this podcast.
That's true. But I will say that one of the things that got me here would be to always invest in yourself. And also understand that if you're going to do this, it's a lifelong journey. It's not something that you're going to, just do. And then if you're going to do it for real, it's going to be something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. And this goes for musicians too. And to always invest in yourself. You spend a lot of money investing in other people's music companies, whether it's Gibson or whether it's, any pro audio company or whatever. It's, people spend a lot of money on musical gear, and that's great. And those gear companies are worth it. But don't forget to spend that money on yourself, whether it's, and time is money, so you have to spend the time. You have to do the research, try things out, go intern at studios, go learn from people who are better than you. Don't just YouTube everything. Get into the field, like get your hands dirty,
YouTube is like, it occurs to me that that's like the version of practicing at home in your bedroom and never learning how to play with some other musicians.
Absolutely. It is. It's how do you take those lessons that you use, or the lessons that you've learned rather, and use them in a real world scenario.
Yeah.
And basically trying to learn about these things. You also have to learn about people. You have to understand that people are, you have all these clients that come in, and you have to understand how to work people, meaning like how to get the best out of them, how to get them to trust you. It's a relationship, so just like you're going to learn from somebody who might know more than you forge that relationship and they trust you, and then you end up having a friendship, and then you learn like that. Surround yourself with people who know what they're doing, who you want to be like. And like I asked Tony Hall, the great bassist, one time.
Oh, he's great. I met him. He was on the Emmylou Harris sessions here with Daniel Lanois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Tony's a good friend of mine. And I asked him one time, I was like, Tony, how do you get all these great gigs? Because he's playing with Santana and with Trey Anastasio and Dave Matthews on. He goes, easy, bro, you got to hang out. And I said, what does that mean? And he goes, you got to go where those people are going to be, and you got to hang out. Eventually, they're going to realize that you're a good person, and they're going to take you under their wing, and you're going to meet people, and that's how you're going to get yourself into the right scenario. So, you need to take engineering, producing, musicianship out of the bedroom and onto the streets, and you gotta meet people. The way that I got a lot of gigs is either through word of mouth or through hanging out or just being in the right place at the right time. You know,
got to get out of the studio too.
Yeah, you really do. Because you have to, these bands, they want to see you as one of them. And especially if you're a musician, you are one of them. You know, so like I deal with a lot of young bands now, and they look up to me because I've done what they're trying to do. And they always ask me, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? But I still go to their shows and I still hang out, and they still come to my house, and we'll have drinks, and so I try to befriend the people who I work with, because to me there's not really a divide. It's not just client relationships, it's friends, you know. So those are the things that I would tell people, is that you're trying to sell, you know, you get into this industry, you got to sell yourself. We got to remember, people got to be able to stay in a room with you for 12 hours.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good point. They got to know if they want to know if you smell good.
Right. You got to, all of those things are so important, because people have got to be able to tolerate you. It's the same thing with doing a tour gig. If you're just a complete nuisance on tour and you're complaining and they're not going to want to be around you, you're going to get kicked off the tour before you know it. Yeah. You know, so those are the types of things that I would tell people, you know. And gear is great. Invest in gear. You know, I am somebody who definitely invested in gear, but I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was buying gear, and then I was realizing that, oh, this isn't the greatest, and I would resell it and try to upgrade. But once again, my ears weren't strong enough to know what really was good and what wasn't good, you know. So I still remember back in the day, I had a couple of pieces of gear that was like prosumer gear that I thought sounded great, you know, back then, that I think sound terrible now, you know. So you just learn, you know, but keeping that old mind machine going where you're constantly questioning, like I have pieces of gear that are made by some of the greatest, you know, pro audio gear makers in the world, who sometimes I put stuff in and I go, does that sound good? You know, like, so it's not just turnkey. It's not paint by numbers. Use your ears.
Yeah. Well, great advice, Jack, and awesome to have you on the show, man. Thank you so much for doing this. How can the rock stars find you? Where would you like them to go? I mean, of course, we have links in the show notes, and I encourage you to go listen to these records. But if they would like to reach out to you, maybe they're ready to come learn more about you or come to New Orleans and make a record. There's
a contact page on my website. It's jackmiele.com, JACKMIELE.com. You can also find me on Instagram. It's and TikTok, and Facebook. It's all Jack Miele Productions.
Awesome.
And I actually am on Twitter as well, or X, I guess now. So that's also Jack Miele Productions as well.
Well, it sounds like it'd be a fun place to go to make a record in the Garden District of New Orleans. That just sounds pretty groovy.
It's pretty. It's the Lower Garden District, so it's like the very edge of it. It's like one of the last streets, but it's beautiful. If you take a walk around, it's kind of butted up against the Warehouse District.
Awesome.
But yeah, next time you're in town, come hang out with me.
All right, and we'll go out and see the Molly Ringwalds play. Oh no, wait a minute, you'll be in the band.
Well, also we'll be up in Nashville coming soon.
All right, groovy. Well, Jack, thanks for hanging with us. Rockstars, thanks for listening. I look forward to meeting you in person, dude, and coming around the studio.
Thank you, Lidge. You too.
All right, cheers.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this show possible. Isotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. At empiricallabs.com, use the code RSR10 for 10% off the Arouser and Big Freak plugins. And finally, use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom patch bay labels at traceaudio.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.